morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's timely and high-stakes conversation. My name is Jason Xu. I'm a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. Formerly, I served as a legislator at large in Taiwan's national parliament. Today, we are very delighted to assemble a group of very esteemed panelists to discuss the issues on tariffs and its impact and responses, as well as implications to Taiwan and Indo-Pacific. We are here at a critical juncture while Taiwan has long occupied a unique position in global economy. Small in size, immense in strategic value, it now faces a new layer of uncertainty. Potential tariffs from its closest democratic partner, the United States. Although details are not yet finalized, the signaling is clear. Taiwan might be subjected to a broad tariff regime, 15 to 35% in some brackets, excluding semiconductors. But even without implementation, the threat alone marks a fundamental shift. It challenges the long-held assumptions about like-minded economic alignment, about the role of a democratic solidarity in trade, and about how Taiwan is perceived. Not only as a trusted partner, but perhaps also just another node in a realigned industrial calculus. This panel will not speculate on politics. Instead, we aim to bring analytical rigor to a fluid situation, to examine how tariffs on Taiwan could ripple through global supply chains, reshape capital flows, and alter trajectory of a US-Taiwan economic cooperations. Each of our panelists bring a deep well of insight, academic, diplomatic, and institutional. We begin with the opening remarks from each speaker before diving into a moderate discussions. The question before us are both urgent and strategic. How should Taiwan respond in coming weeks? What tools, diplomatic, economic, or structural, can be used to mitigate the fallout? And what does this moment reveal about the future of globalization, trust, and geoeconomic alignment? With that, let me briefly introduce today's panelists. Let me begin with Professor Xie Changtai. Professor Xie is a professor at Booth School of Business, University of Chicago. He's a leading economist on productivity, trade, and global value chains. Professor Xie's research explores how economic policy and industrial structure shape growth across the nations and institutions. Next, we're also delighted to welcome my dear friend, Minister Zhang Deng. Zhang is a former minister without portfolio and chief trade representative of Taiwan. As Taiwan's top trade negotiator during critical US-Taiwan and multilateral trade talks, Minister Deng brings deep experiences in strategy, policy formation, and high-stakes diplomacy under pressure. Next, we're also delighted to welcome Brett Sesser. He's currently a senior fellow at Council on Foreign Relations, and he's also served as a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of the US Treasury. As an expert on international microeconomics, global imbalances, and financial flows, Brett is widely respected for his analysis of how US economic policy intersects with trade, tariffs, and geopolitical strategy. Last but not least, we have our very own Riley Waters. Riley is currently a senior fellow at Hudson Institute, where he focuses on US economic statecraft and Indo-Pacific strategy. His work bridges trade, technology, and national security, offering a valuable lens on how tariffs fit into Washington's evolving Asia-Pacific agenda. We are very lucky to have all of you with us today, and we're looking forward to a robust and lively discussion. So with that, let me turn to our first speaker, Minister Deng, to give his opening statement. Zhang, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jason, for offering me these opportunities to join this very distinguished guests, panelists, to discuss the one of the most talk topic in Taiwan. I can tell you, since I'm in Taiwan now, that I can tell you that there's a full of anxieties now in this society, that waiting for the result of President Trump's decision on how much tariff that the U.S. is going to impose on Taiwan's export. We of course we look into the other countries, how other countries were treated very carefully, and for instance, our neighboring countries, Japan, Korea was 25%. We saw Thailand was 40%. So those kind of numbers make people very nervous. Taiwan is a trading country. We rely upon trade. Our business wants to have a stable and predictable business environment so that they can conduct their business plan. And in the past, that proves that they are very well in their share of their work. So this is full of anxieties now. We understand that the U.S. approach to this negotiation is exercise the highest pressure on the other side, so that this art of negotiation can produce the best result for the United States. However, several points I would like to raise here. One, Taiwan from the beginning is taking very cooperative approach. Unlike some countries, which I don't think I need to name it, that they use a very confrontational, if you do this, we'll do that kind of approach. Taiwan is totally different. From president until the ministers, they all make it very clear that they want to cooperate with the United States. We are not necessarily agree with some of the measures U.S. takes now, but we understand the reason behind it. We understand that there's a lack of balance between U.S. and some of its trading partners. We understand that. We understand the problem of Rust Belt. Well, we understand that many of the people in the United States sees the threat from some countries which take away their job employment opportunities. So we understand that. So that's why Taiwan are from beginning are taking this cooperative approach. We hope that U.S. decision makers can recognize that and work with us instead of treating Taiwan as those countries who is taking different confrontational approach. That's one thing. Second, the industrial pattern is different in Taiwan than, for instance, in China. In the case of China, they have full supply chain in China, within China. No other countries can have really a reasonable share of their supply, their economic fruits. In Taiwan's case, we do a particular sector which we are specialized. Taiwan is good at it. So upstream can be benefited, downstream can be benefited. So it's different. We are helping US industries. We are not hurting US industries. We are not competing with US industries. I think there are many, many examples. This is not an academic study. Otherwise, we can show many, many numbers to prove that point. My last point is there are some market access. In your term, you use irritants, which basically relating to food and safety, food and healthy issues. I think those are headache to both of us for many, many years. I hope that we can find a solution to phase out those irritant, so that the business relation can be closer, even closer and healthier after this difficult period. Thank you very much. I'll stop here.
Yeah, thank you, Minister Deng. Let me turn to Brad for his remarks and statement. Brad, over to you.
Well, thanks for inviting me to this this distinguished panel. I will highlight what I think are three critical points in the negotiations that I assume are taking place. It is certainly the case that the negotiations with Taiwan have been conducted in the background, and there's not much public discussion of the state of the negotiations. And to my knowledge, Taiwan has not received one of the famous letters. So we will see what that means. I think the first issue is how Taiwan fits into the broader regime for tariffing embedded Chinese content, and whether or not the base tariff for all of Asia is going to be 20%, as seems to be the case with the deal on Vietnam, or more like 10%, which was the agreed number for the UK. In addition to the question of the base tariff and whether that will be much higher for Asia because Asia runs a bilateral surplus with the United States, there is a second question about how embedded Chinese content, and I think it is broader than just transshipment. Transshipment is technically illegal as it is. It's taking a product out of one box and putting it into another box and saying it comes from a country which it doesn't come from. But there's a much broader trade which involves Chinese components for final that are assembled outside of China and under standard trade rules would not be considered Chinese, even with a very high level of embedded Chinese content. Taiwan is certainly a part of that broader ecosystem. And we've seen a big increase in imports of servers, of certain categories of computers and electronics from Taiwan after tariffs were placed on China, effectively tariffs on final assembly. So I think we don't really know beyond the broad contours of the Vietnam deal, which Vietnam doesn't fully accept as a deal, where the base tariff is going to be and what the rules are going to be for embedded Chinese content. Those are both critical issues. Second issue is how semiconductors are treated. I think it is clear that the Trump administration believes that the US needs a significantly larger domestic high-end semiconductor industry. That was also the conclusion of the Biden administration. TSMC and others have been encouraged to invest in the US as a result of that. It is also likely the case that the Trump administration believes that the semiconductor industry can be induced to produce more in the United States with tariffs, not just through the incentives in the CHIPS Act. If so, the tariffs almost certainly have to be tariffs on embedded semiconductors. So Taiwanese chips that go to China for final assembly could face the semiconductor tariff. I think that's going to be a very critical issue. It may actually be the most important issue for Taiwan. The third issue is a delicate one. It's how macroeconomics and currency will figure in to these negotiations. Taiwan obviously runs a significant bilateral trade surplus with the United States, a bilateral surplus that has soared actually because of final assembly of some electronics that used to be made in China. Taiwan also runs an enormous current account surplus. Taiwan's current account surplus has been over 10% of its GDP for every year of the past 10 years. Taiwan has one of the world's most, by almost every metric, undervalued currencies. And that undervaluation has at times been sustained through direct intervention in the foreign exchange market and by encouraging domestic Taiwanese financial institutions to take what I would say is an ungodly amount of currency risk. Taiwan's lifers have been correctly identified as a major financial risk because they have the largest unhedged foreign currency position relative to the size of their home economy of any of Asia's core financial sectors. Taiwan has been intervening in the foreign exchange market for the past several months. There is strong pressure on the Taiwan dollar to appreciate, and that pressure is now being resisted. The US, if it so wanted, will likely be able to name Taiwan as a currency manipulator in October. I think it is a critical question how currency enters into this negotiation and whether a creative solution can be found that opens up a path for the Taiwan dollar to appreciate, as I think is clearly necessary, while recognizing that special consideration needs to be given to steps needed to assure financial stability in Taiwan. So I think those are the three issues. I frankly don't yet have any clarity about where these negotiations are heading. I kind of suspect they won't be concluded by August 1st, and this will be a continuing story. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. It's fascinating. You and I had some discussions when we were in Brussels, and this really aligns with what Chang-Tai also have been thinking about Taiwan's, again, undervalued currency. So it'd be good for Chang-Tai to speak and also give your personal remark and statement on this issue as well. Over to you.
Yeah, so I want to say two things. One is that I think that at the end of the day, I don't expect any potential tariff that is imposed on Taiwan to really have that much of an impact on Taiwan. And this is the reason why, that tariffs matter to the extent that Taiwanese products have more or less close substitutes. There is a set of products, let me just call that the products in the AI sector, for which there are basically no substitutes for products that are made in Taiwan. If you want to make a chip, there's no substitute to TSMC. If you want to make an AI server, there's no substitute for the servers that are made by companies like Foxconn and Windstrom, and they're basically no code. Now, what that means is that an American company that is facing the tariff, that is facing the tariff, they have nowhere else to turn to. You could say that, well, what is going to do that the higher tariff, whether it's 20 or 30%, that could, in some cases, cause American companies or American consumers to just not use that product at all. But that's also not likely, given how important AI investment is for American companies, and given how large the profit margins are. So for those set of products, I expect that what's going to happen at the end of the day is that it's just going to have a minor effect on the margins of the customers of Taiwanese products. There's another set of products that Taiwan makes. So let me just call that Taiwanese products I don't know of a good name, but let me just call these the low-end products, the Taiwanese machine tools and the Taiwanese bicycles. There are a lot of substitutes for the products made by Taiwanese companies. But this is the thing, though. Most of the substitutes are not in the U.S., but they're in other countries. So Taiwan potentially faces a problem there if it faces a higher tariff compared to other companies in other countries that are producing close substitutes. But given what we're seeing now, like like if you think about a Korean substitute or a Chinese substitute or a substitute made by a company in Vietnam, I don't expect the tariff that Taiwan is going to ultimately face to be much higher than that of the other than Vietnam or Korea or Thailand. So I don't expect to be that much of an impact either. The second thing I want to say is that the biggest unknown, and I think the biggest, I'm going to reflect a bit on what Minister Deng said. It is true that Taiwan has gone in, and it's been unusual in the sense that it's been one of the few countries that has refrained from discussing how unfair, ridiculous the term tariffs are. It's gone in, and I don't exactly remember Minister Deng's words, that it's gone in with the mindset that we are going to cooperate and we are going to do everything we want, with the exception of one thing. And what I have found is that there's been no willingness in Taiwan to discuss two things. There's been no willingness to discuss, broadly speaking, macro policy. There's been no willingness to discuss the 15% trade surplus, the overall trade surplus. I think that we can all agree that focusing on the bilateral surplus is really not the thing to do. And there's been no willingness to discuss exchange rate policy. There's been no willingness to discuss the exchange rate policy. And this is something that Brad has talked about for a long time, that I think that is an even bigger question that Taiwan faces, that it's not being willing to discuss. It's not being willing to discuss. And I think that to talk about something that Brad has been talking about for a long time, I think there is a real risk that, like, one of the consequences of the macro policy that Taiwan has been facing is what's happened to the life insurance companies. And I think it's at the juncture where, if nothing is done, it faces a major financial blowup in the next few years. And what's not encouraging from my point of view is the behavior of Taiwan's regulators with respect to the insurance companies, that whenever they have ran into trouble, instead of enforcing the regulations, they basically revise the regulations. They revise, and this has happened 3 times. So there were rules that limited the amount of dollar assets that the life insurance companies could take on. There was a loophole that the life insurance companies exploited. Brad has written about this, and the financial regulators turned a blind eye to this. This was about 5 or 6 years back. Okay, 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, there was another problem, which is that world interest rates were rising. So the consequence of world interest rates rising is that the value of your bond portfolio falls. That's just basic finance. What the Taiwanese financial regulators did is that when that happened, it rewrote the rules so that it wouldn't have to take into account the fact that its bond portfolio had fallen in value. And the most recent thing was 2 months ago, which was that with the 10% appreciation of the Taiwan dollar, the financial regulator, the response is that it changed the rules once again. It changed the rules once again so that it doesn't have to take into account. They are complications. It doesn't have to take into account the fact that its dollar assets, when converted to NT dollars, has now fallen in value. Everybody knows that it has by 10%. So this looks to me like a disaster in the making, because none of these rule changes affect the real value of the portfolio of the life insurance companies. And with another 10% appreciation of the anti-dollar, which seems likely to me, or another 20% appreciation of the anti-dollar, this huge part of the financial sector is effectively going bankrupt. It doesn't. At some point, you run out of financial engineering to deal with this. And given sort of the political system in Taiwan, the only solution that I mean, I predict what's going to happen is that there's going to be an enormous bailout by the government, because no government in Taiwan can is going to be able to push back against the pressure of all these Taiwanese families who thought that they had they have all these promises made by the life insurance companies, and the life insurance companies say, sorry, we can't pay them back. It can't be there. So it's a financial disaster in the making, and I think Taiwan is really burying its head in the sand regarding this issue. So to just come back, I think that all this nervousness and all the discussion in Taiwan, I think is really misplaced. It's been misplaced. That it's not focused in what I think the real issues are that Taiwan faces. That I think the real threats that it faces is not so much a tariff, but it's in what I'll just not mince words, in its disastrous macro policy. All right, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Chantai. And let me turn to my colleague Riley to give his statement. Riley, here, go.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Yeah, I think I want to try and put the tariffs in a broader context, and perhaps try and frame them within the U.S. interests and the strategic interests in the Indo-Pacific. And so, actually, the Taiwan is a great example, because what I love to do when trying to describe U.S. trade policy to people, I often use Taiwan as an example, because when we talk about Taiwan, we often talk about strategic ambiguity, which is the U.S.'s unwillingness to commit to the defense of Taiwan. It's ambiguous as a strategy, and I like to say that Trump is the embodiment of ambiguity. Right? He doesn't want anyone to know what he's thinking. He doesn't really want anyone to know his what he truly wants. And the way that he acts is unpredictable, and many times people don't understand what he's going to say at the end of the day sometimes. So it's ambiguous by nature. And so that is where we are right now with trade policy. It's completely ambiguous. We have an idea of what Trump ultimately wants, but we don't know if that's really what he wants. And when you talk to people in this administration or people who support this administration, the goals are ever changing. They're always changing. Whether it's trying to address trade deficits, whether it's trying to address security issues, domestication of industries, it can be different depending on who you talk to. What we hear from Trump and sort of the lessons that we can learn for Taiwan based off of the current trade negotiations with all countries, not just with Taiwan or one specific country like Japan or the EU, is that there is no common thread. Actually, the only common thread that we have is that Trump very vocally says that things like the United States has been ripped off by friend and foe alike for decades, right? It doesn't matter if you are communist China across the Taiwan Strait. It doesn't matter if you are, the strategic and familiar partner that is the United Kingdom. It's all the same apparently to him, and so that's the approach he's taking to these trade negotiations, and that really resonates, I think, diplomatically, right? There's many layers, I think, of this trade issue, right? There is the hardcore macroeconomics. We can talk about the effect it might have on surpluses, deficits, exchange rates, but there's also a real diplomatic and political effect that it's having in various countries. Taiwan, for example, like Minister Deng was saying, people are upset about this. In Japan, which is another area I focus a lot on, they have elections this month, and sure enough, tariffs are becoming a big conversation in that, even though at the end of the day, it might not really affect Japan that much. We also, again, we don't know what the outcome of those negotiations are going to look like. So it's very ambiguous, and it's hard to discern what it means for Taiwan. If we look at the trade negotiations that we have so far, really, we only have one. I'm pretty sure it's just one trade negotiation concluded with the United Kingdom, and even then, it's kind of to be continued. We have an agreement with the United States with China. I don't know if the actual text of that has been released, but I think there's consensus on that. But if you look at all the other trading partners, there's no discernible differentiation between foe or friend alike, right? And so people will often ask, where does Taiwan sit with all this? People thought negotiations with Japan and South Korea would be really easy. Those would be early harvests because we are not just allies, right? We're very close. And we would think, I think a lot of in the foreign policy community would think that those countries would be closely aligned with the United States in dealing with what many see as the biggest problem, which is China. But no, they also received letters saying that on August 1st, you will get a 25% tariff rate. Of course, many also think that the letters that have gone out are sort of another step in negotiations. So negotiations at this point are not concluded for anyone, is kind of what I'm saying right now. What does the negotiations ultimately mean for U.S. interests? Again, it goes back to what we think the Trump administration wants. Transshipment is becoming a sort of a hotter topic as we see that emerge in these letters. Higher tariff rates for goods that are being transshipped, even though, as Brad mentioned, it is illegal inherently. I think if you talk to, if you see the announcements from the White House on the effects, the sort of the benefits of tariffs, it always comes back to domestic investment. It's foreign companies investing in the United States, and they're talking about the grandness of it, the hundreds of billions of dollars of new revenue, new investment that is coming in that will support domestic jobs and things like that. And so that'll continue. That will have a real effect, but it's still uncertain what those announcements will have for trade negotiations. So, Jason and I, for example, we were in Taiwan a few months ago when TSMC made its large $100 billion investment. It's new $100 billion investment. This is not the first time TSMC had made a large announcement to invest in the United States, but while we were there, they did, and sure enough, they received the White House rolled out the red carpet for them and welcomed TSMC, into the White House to make this grand announcement. What effect has that actually had on trade negotiations? We don't know. We don't know at this point, and so it's very frustrating, I think, for people in Taipei. It's frustrating for people who watch the news, where you have folks on Bloomberg, for example, talking about the uncertainty that tariffs create and how it really builds a lot of skepticism into U.S. trade policy. And so, what could tariffs, let's say we actually get tariffs at the end of the day. Of course, the rate of the tariff matters. If there's specific commodities that get higher tariff rates, there's likely to be just a separate tariff line for semiconductors, whatever those actually look like, whether we're talking about directly traded or embedded semiconductors. But I think regardless of the tariff rate itself, what we are seeing growing in Asia is a increasing U.S. skepticism. Now, that might be on purpose. Again, some of this may be a part of U.S. strategy to encourage more people to cut ties, do less global trade and do more domestication. As Minister Deng was saying, China has the ability to do a lot in-house within its own country. And I think if you talk to people in the United States, they would like to have that as well. They would like to remove some of those choke points or supply chain disruptions that we've seen over the last several years to increase that domestication. But what it also does is it also does not create great confidence in U.S. trade policy. It ultimately increased costs at the end of the day because of tariffs. And what it could also do, which I think is not in the U.S.'s interests, is it could harm our partners and allies' economies themselves, right? We don't want Taiwan, we don't want Japan, we don't want South Korea, we don't want the EU to have weaker economies. If the trade negotiations or the tariffs themselves ultimately weaken their economies, that could be bad. I mean, there is some debate to have there, like what does it mean for the U.S. economy? But if we're having a harder time at home and we're also putting greater pressure on our friends and allies abroad at the same time, that is not in the United States' interests. So I'm going to leave with that and love to go into Q&A. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Riley. And what I like to do is actually, I like to break away from the list of questions that I prepared for you, because all of your statements are just fascinating. I think they all touch on things that were kind of hidden behind the media headlines. And so what I see here is actually a conundrum that Taiwan faces. Obviously, as Riley alluded to, Trump's personal negotiation style is unpredictable and it's uncertain. And then the way I see this, and I would love all of your comments on this, is the conundrum that I describe is, if there were indeed a 10% GDP surplus, or the issue with the macro policy, as Trump had mentioned, and then the long overdue currency fixation, and etc. It seems to me these issues are glaring, but then there's also a challenge that Taiwan government faces, which is Taiwan's economy is export driven. If you allow currency to free flow, or if it reaches what we call an equilibrium, and it might greatly impact the Taiwan's export-driven economy, and which might impact the computer electronics sector and as well as the semiconductor sector. Then my question is then, what then is the right solutions to a problem like this? That's more than just item by item negotiation or article to article negotiation. If the issue is something structural and it has a long-term financial consequences, and then you're right, Changtai, Taiwan's life insurance is indeed is now waiting for the crisis looming, lurking in the background to happen. So anyway, let me just put this out to all of you, and I love all of your comments on what is the real solution. And over to you, John first, and then Brad and Changtai, and then Riley. And feel free to add anything that you want to say about this or other things as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jason. I think all other three speakers are excellent. I think you, Jason, you invited a very outstanding group of people, and I think many of the points are very inspiring, and will be very well taken if the message can be known better here in Taiwan. One of your questions, Jason, that is whether a negotiation shall be conducted in a quiet manner or in a rather than public positioning its negotiation lines. Of course, we prefer. I think it is a correct way that many of the issues shall be dealt in a quiet, diplomatic manner. Otherwise, society will get very excited. People will cut those portions that fit their political purpose and then exaggerate the consequence. So then that negotiation cannot go as it should go. Several points, particular Brett and Professor Shell already they both mentioned this. Now, this big surplus, 70 billion, this current account surplus, this exchange rate. We've been, I had the privilege of sitting in some of the meetings while I worked for the government. We wanted, we are struggling how to settle this. United States is our strategic partner. There's no doubt here that to have the U.S. as our friends and our policy should be aligned with the United States. It's for the benefit of Taiwan. There's no doubt for the government policymakers. And I think for the majority of the people in the society, it also supports this view. So we call 亲美派, that is, US is our strategic friends, is our ally. Now, how to make US, how to address this big surplus? Two possibilities. One, let the market decides. Second, government intervention. How government can intervene this to reduce this surplus? Really, we couldn't think of any except to buy more. Jason, in your question, you mentioned about to buy more LNGs, to buy many crude oils, to buy many grants. Those are all the things we are trying very, very hard to do it. We exert to the highest extent that government can exert to do this, to achieve this, to buy more. Now, of course, President Lai announced that we will raise our defense budget. That may also increase some of the buying from the United States. But we would like to, I think we would like to know, and please trying to help us to understand how while we respect market, but how government intervention can help to reduce that deficit. As to exchange rate, I've been working in government in the policy making position for long, but basically that Jason, you may have to organize another seminar to discuss exchange rate, because in our division of the labor, it is solely on the central banks jurisdiction. Brett also mentioned that we should have more manufacture a portion on semiconductors in the United States. I think that again, if we give TSMC more time, I think one of the reasons they go to United States is close to market, close to their customers. So that might happen. Of course, we hope that since you cannot pour 揠苗助长, you cannot pour this. How you, Jason, help me translate this English.
You cannot pull the young sapling and then make it grow faster and stronger. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's what I mean. So with that, I hope U.S. government, U.S. academic community can understand that Taiwan really is working, trying to work with the United States. We hope that we can discuss these things over thoroughly and find a best solution, and hopefully not hurting Taiwan's economy or hurting Taiwan's public feeling too much. Thank you, Jason.
Mhm. Thank you. Over to you, Brett or Chantai. You want to go first?
Yeah. Can I just add to what the minister said? I'll say that in terms of, so what does Taiwan do about the trade surplus? And I would say that it's the trade surplus with the U.S. is a political problem, but really the economic problem is Taiwan's overall trade surplus, the large overall trade surplus, which is just unprecedented. 15% of GDP is way above what you see in any other country in the world. South Korea is at 3. South Korea is just so out of bounds with what we see. The solution that Taiwan's government has proposed, which is exerting pressure to buy, American LNG, to purchase weapons, I think goes exactly in the wrong direction. It's because what that does is it's just hugely distortionary. I mean, it's hugely distortionary. Why are you gonna buy American gas if the gas that you buy from Australia and Qatar, which I think are the two big suppliers of LNG to Taiwan, are better and cheaper? I mean, why are you going to do that? Fundamentally, and both Jason and the minister will know more about this, is that it's a political problem of the governance of the central bank. That's really that's really what it comes down to. And my sense is that there's been no willingness to do something about that. I don't know how many of you are privy to the details. President Tsai tried, and she failed to change the governance of the central bank. So she was roundly defeated in her attempt to try to change the governance of them. And my sense is that they have given up on trying to do that. But that doesn't mean that it's still not the root of the problem. It's still fundamentally, so to answer the question, what is generating this is basically non-market interventions in Taiwan, not by it's not about what the executive yuan is doing, but it's about this other part of the government, which is the central bank, right? Which is what the central bank is. So it's all about market interventions or distortionary market intervention. That doesn't make it, even if the executive yuan can't do anything about it under the current rules, that doesn't make it less distortionary. And that doesn't make the problems go away, right?
Yeah.
And let me just add one last thing about this narrative that Taiwan is an export-oriented economy, which is true, of course. But what that ignores is that the vast majority of Taiwanese workers are employed in companies that only serve the domestic market. The vast majority, something like 70% of jobs in Taiwan are in companies that only serve the domestic market. The vast majority of companies in Taiwan, something like 70 to 80%, only serve the domestic market. They would benefit. They are the ones that suffer. The Taiwanese worker suffers from an undervalued exchange rate. The vast majority of Taiwanese companies suffer from an undervalued. But I would say I don't quite understand the politics of why they don't have a voice. Like, everybody talks about all these export-oriented companies that are going to lose when the exchange rate appreciates, which is true, of course. But nobody talks about all of the Taiwanese workers whose wages are low, whose purchasing power is low, all of the Taiwanese companies who only serve the domestic market. And let me just bring up one particular example. This is not a small company by any means, but Taiwan's power company, the state-owned company, Tai Power, it's been running these enormous deficits, deficits to the tune of about $10 billion a year for the last 3 years. For the last 3 years. So it is a huge issue, right? It's a huge issue. One thing that will help solve that problem is an appreciation of the NT dollar, a further appreciation of the NT dollar, for the basic reason that its purchases are in US dollars and its revenues are in NT dollars. So an appreciation of the exchange rate is going to make some progress towards the deficits of Thai power. So there no longer is going to be, eventually, my hope is that eventually it's going to be able to stand on its own feet, and it doesn't have to go back to the legislated yen every year begging for more money. So that's just
Yes.
a,
Let me just cut you here. I think that's pretty, yeah, I think it's good. And let me turn to Brad as well to touch upon this issue. And I do want to note that, again, the currency appreciation is not trade negotiations purview. I don't know how much power they have when negotiating this to have a say, but I think these are important issues to be raised. Over to you, Brad, please.
Well, maybe I'll make three points because I basically agree with Chong Tai in a deep sense. The first one is, and I think it's obvious, that what matters for many countries is not just the absolute level of the tariff, but where their tariffs are in relation to other countries. It is much more damaging if Taiwan has a 30% tariff and its neighbors have a 20% tariff than if everybody has a 25% tariff. And I think that has been one of the difficulties in the negotiations, is that there isn't that general clarity about the level of the tariff that the region, broadly speaking, faces. Second, actually, I do think currency will be a part of the negotiation eventually. It is true that trade negotiators per se don't negotiate details of currency deals. That is the purview of the Treasury, it's the purview of the central bank. It is also true that a number of recent broad agreements have had a currency component. There was a currency component actually in the phase 1 deal with China. And like it or not, the October Treasury Foreign Exchange Report is going to trigger a negotiation independent of the trade deal, because Taiwan will cross the thresholds and at a minimum enter into a period of enhanced engagement, which is effectively a negotiation. So there is, in my mind, no realistic way at this point, given the magnitude of intervention that took place in the second quarter, for Taiwan to avoid a discussion about currency. The third point is that macroeconomic change is hard, it's difficult, and there needs to be a plan for managing Taiwan's transition to a less export-driven economy. I think Chong Tai and I both agree that Taiwan just cannot run 15% of GDP current account surpluses indefinitely. That's an excess of export dependence. It also generates ever-growing financial losses as more and more Taiwanese actors accumulate dollars, which will fall in value, as will happen with the life insurance industries. So it is much better to be a bit proactive. And I think as part of that proactive policy, Taiwan has to make a decision about whether it wants to recapitalize the life insurance industry using the central bank's balance sheet or using the finance ministry's balance sheet. There has to be a recapitalization. That recapitalization can take place before the currency moves or after, but there is no way to really avoid it. You just have to decide on which balance sheet will the cost lie. And as part of an agreement where Taiwan stops defending blocking appreciation at 29, and in the past at 28. I mean, Taiwan's government has been very active in maintaining a surplus by managing its currency. So the government has to step back from that kind of heavy management around particular levels. But I would recognize that moving from a world where everyone expects the central bank to come in at particular levels to a world where there's a much freer float is going to be a huge transition. And as part of a real transition, the US should make some allowances for ongoing intervention that smooths the move. You don't want to immediately go to 22. I think there should be some smoothing of volatility in the true sense, not the sense in which the Central Bank of China, Taipei, uses that term. Because they use that term often to mean we're defending 28 or we're defending 29. That has to stop. But if part of a real shift, the US should make some compromises that allows some currency management along the transition. Now, these are really hard societal level decisions, but in my view, my personal view, they can't be deferred much longer. And it is better to act now. If you wait, the losses inside Taiwan's financial sector only get bigger. Thanks.
Riley?
If I could, yeah, thank you. I think these are all great points. You know, currency is a part of these negotiations, even if it's just rhetorically. The infamous Liberation Day poster board, it mentioned currency on there. It said something like, you know, trade measures and currency costs, right? Now, whether currency is actually a major feature of any of the negotiations, whether it's Taiwan or other countries, I don't think it is. In fact, if we look at negotiations with Japan, the finance minister and our Secretary of Treasury have often deferred currency out of these negotiations. Now, that's not to say that they won't be eventually, but I think for the purposes of August 8th, or maybe even, you know, if there's some sort of, well, of course there's going to be continued negotiations, but how public those actually become, for the purpose of future negotiations, I don't know necessarily how largely they will feature. I don't think we've talked a lot about Taiwan's economy transitioning to something more resilient. I don't think that this administration necessarily cares. You know, their goals right now are not to change the macroeconomics or necessarily the fiscal or monetary policy of other countries. It's to reduce the trade deficit. It's to get more manufacturing within the United States. And whether these are benefits of the tariff negotiations or not, we'll see. I do want to go back to something Brad mentioned, which I think is really important, was that, you know, the relative tariff rate that countries get is important. And one of the things that used to be within at least Washington was this focus on competing with China. I don't know how much of that actually features in these trade negotiations anymore. Because what we're seeing is, if China is getting a 30% tariff rate at this point, and its neighbors are getting a 25% tariff rate, that's a difference of only 5%. That's much less of a difference than we saw during the first US-China trade war, which saw manufacturing leave China. The first US-China trade war, during the first Trump administration, you know, we saw tariffs up to 30%, maybe even more, depending on how you calculate them, which was a huge hit to foreign investment into China. There were other reasons as well. But, you know, we saw manufacturing return to Taiwan. We saw manufacturing move to Southeast Asia. It's one of the reasons why we have such a large trade deficit with those countries now, because that manufacturing moved. But there was a strategic component to this, which was that it was leaving China. You know, it was the cost of doing that business, which I would argue is slightly better than, of course, it coming directly from China. But, you know, if those rates are now basically the same, we're not going to have that same movement. I think the Trump administration would argue that that movement will now come to the United States because it is more expensive. I'm skeptical, though, whether it will be at the same levels, given that the macroeconomic just the pure macro, like labor costs, capital costs in the United States are much higher than anywhere else in the world. I don't necessarily think they're going to move like that. So I don't think we should abandon that strategy. I think we should continue to focus on China again while trying to reduce our trade deficits. I understand that this administration thinks those are really important, but we're not seeing that right now. We're not seeing that emphasis, and I think it's going to be less meaningful at the end of the day.
Thank you, Riley. Let me just, in the interest of time, could go on for hours, but I wanted just to ask the last question, because this has been really fascinating and looking at issues that has not been uncovered before. But really looking ahead is a question to all of you, and related to what you have alluded to is, if Taiwan had a window to shape the final outcome, what specific actions would you prioritize right now? And I feel like the currency exchange rate is the elephant in the room. The trade surplus, 15% GDP is the elephant in the room. But obviously, none of us were in the negotiation room with the officials. But just curious to know what would you recommend to Taiwanese government? Let me bring in Changtai, Brad, Riley, and save the best for the last to Minister Dunn. Yeah, over to you, Changtai. Maybe just a short 2-minute comment on recommendations. Yeah, thank you.
I would say that there are two things. Mostly when I'm talking, what I've been trying to think about is what is good for Taiwan, like regardless of what the U.S. does. I mean, this is regardless of what the U.S. does. In terms of, obviously, and this is something that Riley has said, broadly, it's clear that the U.S., the Trump administration, doesn't give a damn about Taiwan. I mean, so it doesn't give a damn, regardless of what the rhetoric is. As the Taiwanese have to watch out for themselves. So in terms of what does the Trump administration want, I don't think they know enough to think about currency. And if there's any currency adjustments, whatever adjustments is going to happen, it's going to happen way after the Trump administration is done. So I don't think that is what they will ultimately care about. What I've seen in terms of the Trump, administration, is that it seems that Taiwan is doing the right thing. I mean, in terms of satisfying the Trump administration, which is a combination of investment plus the equivalent of the Phase 1 deal. And so I refer to the Phase 1 deal in 2020 between the U.S. and China, which is the typical, the standard mercantilist purchase agreement, which is that I will purchase your stuff, I will purchase the stuff, and which is what I think the Taiwanese have been trying to put on the table. This is something that Minister Deng said, right? So in terms of that package, whether this matters for the Trump, so this is something I don't think anybody knows about the Trump administration, is whether it makes a difference whether you're confrontational or whether you're conciliatory. The evidence that we have so far is that it doesn't make a difference, right? It doesn't make a difference. That is, if you are confrontational, or whether you are conciliatory and you give the Trump administration everything that they want, you get hit with 20. Regardless. That seems to be what we're seeing, right? That seems to be what we're seeing, but we don't know, right? So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Over to you, Brett.
3 recommendations. First recommendation is that Taiwan should have a plan to raise its defense budget to 5% of GDP. It is good for the alliance. It's also good for macroeconomic adjustment. It should be financed by a bigger government deficit, which in macroeconomic terms is part of how Taiwan's economy rebalances. Second recommendation, the Central Bank of China, Taipei, the Central Bank of Taiwan, should send a very high-level delegation to the U.S. Treasury and offer a path that leads the Taiwan dollar to be somewhere around 25 by the end of this year or early next year. And see if in exchange for a true change, because Taiwan has never in recent history allowed the Taiwan dollar to appreciate through 28, the US would provide some consideration both in the tariff negotiations and in the foreign exchange report to this commitment. Third, and I think Taiwan is already doing this, the US does believe, and I think this is bipartisan, that advanced node semiconductors need to be made much more significantly in the United States. And since the tariffs on semiconductors are meant to achieve that goal, and they have a cost in the interim, see if there is some willingness in return for serious commitments. And serious commitments mean, as a share of TSMC's total output, we commit to have 50% of our production in the United States within a defined time period. And that includes 50% of our production of the most advanced nodes. Very, very serious commitments. The US would offer lower tariffs on semiconductors, pretty much for everyone, because if you know, for on the chip side, for the advanced nodes, Taiwan is the game, and for advanced production, Taiwan and Korea are kind of the game. I think you have to have a separate plan for legacy, and maybe Taiwan and the US could work constructively there. But if there is a serious offer, and I will make one final point here, part of that serious offer has to include a commitment by TSMC to stop complaining about how expensive American workers are when Taiwan is intervening to keep its workers cheap. It annoys me, and I'm pretty sure it annoys the Trump administration. That's it.
Thank you, Brad. Riley, please.
I want to say that the Lai administration, I think, has been doing the right thing. He's been, they have been negotiating in good faith. They've been engaging. They've been willing to not just try to address the surplus that Taiwan has, but also work on things like defense spending, willing to work on regulatory things like export controls and other things that might be strategically aligned with America's interests. So I think they've been going about it the right way. The problem is it's still not enough. It's never going to be enough, I think, for this administration. So, there's really, the only advice that I can really give is that they're not going to get what they want at the end of the day. They're going to get a tariff rate at a base, and they're going to have to not complain about it. That's the thing. If you complain about it, or if you do become sort of confrontational, you will be picked up more in the news. You will become more of a focus for this administration. And what's interesting is that Taiwan has not gotten a letter. Taiwan is not, Taiwan is one of the top 10 countries that the United States has a trade deficit with that has not been mentioned at all. All the other countries have. Taiwan has not been focused on. So, in some ways that's a benefit. It's mostly political though, right? We had to talk about this. This is mostly a political thing. And so at the end of the day, it's going to be a lot of political trading. The Lai administration is going to have to take a political loss at home to give the Trump administration a political win in the United States in order to find some sort of solution, because the Trump administration, they're going to want to win. And they're going to want, of course, the Lai administration to praise this administration for addressing those problems and getting such a win that'll, of course, benefit the United States and Taiwan at the end of the day. So it's going to take a lot of good diplomacy. So prepare for that.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a perfect segue. Good diplomacy to Minister Deng. So I'll allow you to conclude today's panel, please.
Excellent discussion. I want to congratulate Jason and everyone. I think if I'm still working for the government, there are two things I would do. One, I think would tighten up this transshipment. There's more efforts, more work can be done here. This transshipment. That's one thing. Second, I think those market access issue can be can have more rooms that we should be able to do it. Others, I think Brad, Professor Xie mentioned those. I think we need more time to work carefully. I think I like the idea of make a pathway how to make it more smooth. So I think transshipment and market access is in this short time. Those are the two areas I think can be done more. Thank you.
Well, let me take this opportunity to thank all our panelists for this very, again, timely and high stake discussion. And I think we've touched upon problems and then really the core of the issues that rather less discussed, but then I think it's going to have a long-term implications. We're going to release the video soon, and I think if there's somehow can serve as a base of advice or recommendations to the ongoing discussion, I think this would probably be most useful of your time, and also all of you remarks and comments are continuously strengthen a robust US and Taiwan partnership and relationship, and very much grateful for that. And again, thank you for your time. I look forward to having you join us in the near future. Thank you all.